Right now, somewhere in the world, a surgeon is operating on an unconscious patient. The room is sterile. The instruments are clean. There is a machine monitoring the patient's oxygen, heart rate, and blood pressure in real time, and an anesthesiologist whose entire job is to make sure the patient feels nothing at all. For most of human history, none of that existed. Patients were conscious, fully awake, from the first cut to the last. Assistants physically held them down on a wooden table while a packed crowd of up to 150 spectators watched from tiered wooden stands above, pocket watches already open in their hands. They were timing the surgeon. Not because speed was impressive, because speed was the only mercy available in a room with no anesthesia and a screaming patient. And what happened the day someone finally fixed that is not the story you have been told. The name was not an accident. Operating theater. These rooms were built like theaters because that is exactly what they were. Performance spaces, designed around a central floor where the surgeon worked, and a single skylight overhead providing the only light available. No electric lamps, no gas jets overhead. You operated when the sun cooperated. Operations at St. Thomas's Hospital in London ran Fridays, noon to 1, timed precisely to that skylight. 1 hour per week. If you needed surgery on a Thursday, you waited. The surgeon's coat was dark, never washed. A coat caked with dried blood from previous operations was not a hygiene failure. It was a credential. It told everyone in the room how many times this man had stood in that spot before. The more ruined the coat, the more trusted the surgeon. Below the table sat a box of sawdust, for the blood, for whatever else came off. Sir Frederick Trevis, a surgeon of that era, described it plainly. The surgeon, he wrote, stepped into the arena as a matador strides into the ring, a gaping audience around him, and a terror-stricken victim before him. That victim is who we need to talk about next. A handkerchief was placed in the patient's mouth, not to help, to muffle the screaming. Alcohol was sometimes offered, but after surgery, not before. Opium and laudanum could dull the edge of sensation. They could not eliminate it. Nothing available in 1846 could make a human being safely unconscious. The assistants holding the patient down were not a precaution. They were a necessity. Around 50% of patients died either during surgery or from post-operative complications. Around 80% of surgeries led to severe infection. Surgery was a last resort in every sense of that phrase. Historian Sally Frampton at Oxford describes patients refusing to come until they were absolutely at death's door or living in excruciating pain. The poet John Keats trained as a surgical student at Guy's Hospital in London. He attended operations. He found them so disturbing, he abandoned medicine to write poetry. That is how bad it was. Not uncomfortable, not unpleasant, bad enough to drive a man to a different life. So why did anyone agree to get on that table? Because sometimes the alternative was worse, and once you were on it, you wanted the man holding the knife to be fast, very fast. Here is why speed was not just impressive, it was medicine. 3 reasons a faster surgeon saved more lives. Only one was understood at the time. The first was pain. Every additional second on that table was a second of fully conscious agony. Surgical shock, the body's response to extreme trauma, could kill a patient before the surgeon finished. Shorter meant less shock. Less shock meant more survivors. The second was blood. Faster cuts to major vessels meant less time before the tourniquet was tightened. Surgeons who hesitated while sawing through bone watched their patients bleed out. Speed was not recklessness, it was control. The third reason nobody understood at all. A faster operation meant less time the open wound sat exposed in a filthy, unsterilized room. Surgeons worked in street clothes with unwashed hands, reusing the same instruments on patient after patient. Germ theory did not exist. Pasteur would not publish his foundational work until 1857. Fast surgeons had better outcomes without knowing why. Speed minimized infection exposure. The quickest were, accidentally, the most hygienic. Your public mortality rate was your professional reputation. Theater tickets were sold. Speed was the only metric visible to 150 people holding pocket watches. A faster surgeon attracted more patients, more students, more prestige, and more patients meant more income. Speed was not just survival, it was a business model. Which brings us to the man who made it legend. Robert Liston was born in Scotland in 1794. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall at a time when the average British man stood 5 feet 7. In any room he entered, he was physically impossible to ignore. By 1835, he was the first professor of clinical surgery at University College Hospital in London. By 1841, he was a Fellow of the Royal Society. He used straight-bladed knives rather than the curved blades most surgeons preferred, better suited to his particular technique. His colleague, Dr. F. William Koch, described watching him operate. A thrust of the long straight knife, he wrote, 2 or 3 rapid sawing movements, and the upper flap is made. 2 or 3 more lightning-like movements, and the lower flap is cut. His fastest recorded amputation was 28 seconds, a full leg. His mortality rate sat at approximately 1 in 6, significantly better than the Victorian average. For scale, Napoleon's chief surgeon Larry reportedly performed 200 amputations in a single day at the Battle of Borodino in 1812. Larry recorded that figure himself. Liston's popular nickname was the fastest knife in the West End. It is a great name. It also traces to a humorous history book, published in 1983, not to any verified period account. Now here is where the whole story gets genuinely complicated. Here is the story that everyone tells about Robert Liston. He was operating so fast that he accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers alongside the patient's leg. His blade slashed a bystander's coattails so violently that the man assumed he had been stabbed and died of fright on the spot. The patient died of sepsis. The assistant died of sepsis. 3 deaths from one operation. It became known as the only surgery in history with a 300% mortality rate. It is a tremendous story. The problem is that it is probably not true. Every version of this account traces back to a single source. A humorous book called Great Medical Disasters, published in 1983 by a physician-turned-novelist named Richard Gordon, best known for his Doctor in the House comedy series. It was a satirical book. There are no primary sources, no hospital records, no contemporary accounts. Medical historians have searched. They keep arriving at the same 1983 paperback. The legend spread anyway, appearing in serious medical journals and biographies alike. What the actual verified record shows is already enough. October 16, 1846, Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston. A surgical amphitheater called the Ether Dome, still preserved today, still open to visitors. The surgeon was Dr. John Collins Warren, 68 years old, one of the founding figures of Harvard Medical School. The patient was Edward Gilbert Abbott, a 21-year-old printer's apprentice with a congenital tumor below his jaw. The man with the solution was not a physician. William Morton was a 27-year-old dentist. His prior success was a painless tooth extraction 16 days earlier. His device was a custom glass globe with a rubber tube, built and refined by himself. Morton arrived late. Warren had already told the audience he would not show. He showed. Abbott inhaled. He lost consciousness. Warren removed the tumor from Abbott's neck. Abbott woke. Warren asked how he felt. "Feels as if my neck's been scratched," Abbott said. Warren turned to his audience. "Gentlemen," he announced, "this is no humbug." That phrase was not chosen casually. Nearly 2 years earlier, at the same hospital, a failed demonstration of nitrous oxide had ended with that exact word shouted from the crowd. The man who attempted it never recovered professionally. The news crossed the Atlantic in 66 days. December 21st, 1846. University College Hospital, London. 66 days after Boston. The patient was Frederick Churchill, a 36-year-old butler with a chronic bone infection in his tibia. The leg had to come off. A medical student named William Squire arrived carrying what one witness described as an apparatus that looked like an Arabian hookah made of glass. His uncle Peter Squire, a London pharmacist, had built it. Before the operation, Squire tested it on the theater porter, Sheldrake. Sheldrake inhaled, leaped off the table, and ran out of the room cursing at the assembled crowd. Two assistants stood beside the table, ready to hold Churchill down by force if the ether failed. It did not fail. Liston drew his straight amputation knife, notches on the handle counting previous uses. "Now, gentlemen," he said, "time me. 28 seconds." Churchill neither stirred nor cried out. When he woke, he asked when the surgery would begin. He was shown his own elevated stump. "This Yankee dodge," Liston announced, "beats mesmerism hollow." In the stands that afternoon sat a 19-year-old student named Joseph Lister. He walked out knowing surgery would never be quite the same. He would spend the next 2 decades proving it. Here is what nobody tells you about the day surgery was saved. Then mortality went up. With patients unconscious, surgeons became dramatically more confident, more willing than before to operate, more willing to attempt complex and risky procedures they would have previously refused entirely. Operating theaters grew dirtier and more chaotic because the volume of surgery exploded overnight. The same unwashed hands, the same instruments passed from patient to patient without cleaning, the same street clothes. At Massachusetts General Hospital, amputation mortality rates rose from 19% before ether to 23% afterward. Pain was solved, infection was not. And now that patients were no longer screaming, surgeons had lost the most obvious signal that something was going badly wrong. The fix came from the young man sitting in Liston's audience on December 21st, 1846. Joseph Lister read Pasteur's germ theory work around 1865 and developed antiseptic surgical techniques, publishing his findings in 1867. It took 3 sequential revolutions to make surgery survivable. Speed, anesthesia, antisepsis. Not one breakthrough, but 3, spanning decades, each one incomplete without the others. Now consider the 3 men who got there first. Crawford Long, a doctor in rural Georgia, used ether to remove a tumor from a patient's neck in March 1842. 4 years before Morton, he did not publish his results until 1849. He gave the discovery away through 7 years of inaction. Horace Wells was a dentist who attempted a public nitrous oxide demonstration at Massachusetts General Hospital in January 1845. The patient groaned. The crowd shouted humbug. Wells's career was destroyed on the spot. He became addicted to chloroform, was arrested for throwing sulfuric acid at 2 women while under its influence, and died in Tombs Prison in New York in January 1848. He used chloroform to render himself unconscious and a razor to his own femoral artery. He bled to death. William Morton got the credit for October 16, 1846. He immediately tried to patent ether under the deliberately mysterious name Letheon to profit from pain relief. He was widely condemned for it. He spent the rest of his life fighting legal battles over ownership of the discovery. He died at 48, in poverty. The man who saved millions from agony died broke, fighting over who should own the solution. Go back to the theater. The tiered wooden stands, the sawdust box beneath the table, the students with their pocket watches. From there to a glass globe with a rubber tube and a dentist who arrived late. From a 28-second leg to a mortality rate that briefly climbed after the very thing meant to save people. From a 19-year-old in the audience who walked out and spent 20 years finishing what he had witnessed. The history of surgery before anesthesia is not really a story about pain, though there was plenty of it. It is a story about what happens when the only available mercy is speed, and what it costs to replace it with something humane. Robert Liston died on December 7, 1847. A ruptured aortic aneurysm, nearly 14 months after the ether demonstration, at his home in Mayfair. He never had to ask anyone to time him again.